Right, so I just hit the record button there, so we should be good, we should be live, and kind of get into a discussion here.
Sounds good.
For those who have not discovered this podcast yet or are just new to the series and stuff like that, my name is Brad Allen. I'm the creator of the Crusader's Tale series and all that good stuff, and this is the episode 3 podcast, companion episode, to go with the first season's episode 3. So we'll be talking a little bit about that and all that good stuff. And with me here is Mark Fenrick, friend of the family. I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit with your background.
Hello, I'm Mark Fenrick, as he said. I actually have known Brad for, about 20 years now, and I get to be a guest on his podcast. He was a guest on my podcast quite a while ago. I was going to see if I could find some old audio clips so you could hear the change in voice, but I didn't want to embarrass him too much with that, so we'll just leave it at that. And it's nice that you've asked me to be here. I enjoyed watching the episodes. I have not watched past episode 3 yet.
Okay.
I didn't want to jump too far ahead here.
Sure.
And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and not just saying that because we're on recording.
But it's nice for you to say that anyways.
Right. I mean, it's like with my dad, for example. He doesn't need to hear the words, okay, you were right. However, when he hears those words, it's a little bit of an ego boost. So.
And it is on recording now, and you can't edit that out.
Oh, well.
I will let him know that you said it.
Yeah, 3 minutes in, you got to tell him that the timestamp.
Yep, exactly.
He hears that way too much. Oh, Dad, you were right. Oh, what's that? Let me hear that again.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's all the good stuff. But yeah, I mean, obviously, you guys had a podcast of your own. I guess, do you want to briefly get into that? I mean,
that has been a while ago. That boy,
yeah.
we podcasted for 5 years on Star Wars Miniatures, a game by Wizards of the Coast, which has since gone defunct as far as a game, but the fan community has kept it alive. And we enjoyed doing that. We put out a podcast every 3 weeks and talked about the game and talked about the miniatures you could use, and generally had a pretty good time discussing it. And of course, we had both Brad and my own son on every once in a while as guest speakers as they talked about their favorite characters too.
That was a lot of fun, actually. I mean, you know, because you love the movies and stuff like that, and you get such a kick out of watching them and then playing the game and then talking about the game with other people that enjoy it.
Absolutely. Go ahead and Google it. Star Wars Miniverse. It's still out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then people can see or hear the change of voice. I mean,
if you find the right episodes. I don't remember the episode numbers you're in. I did not do that research. I apologize.
Yeah. I mean, there's a running joke that my mom will bring up a lot of times. Well, not a lot of times, but, you know, from time to time she'll bring up the joke because it was very funny where she had been a guest speaker at one point with your wife as well. You know, and because, like, there are these minifigures, these plastic figurines, and, you know, she was saying something about, like, the little guys, like...
She accused your dad of playing with little men.
Yeah.
And that made it into the podcast.
Oh.
And that still comes up to this day. And that, we haven't done this in years.
Right.
And that's still a running joke with her. Well.
Yeah, it's one of those things that just sounds really funny. And...
Well, she even asked me on the air to edit it out, and I said no. And kept
mean,
all that in.
Yeah, I mean, it's too funny. It's like, you know, it's one of those... it's one of those moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, so that's all good stuff, and certainly
it was an enjoyable experience. I'm glad you're taking up the helm here, and I'm going to try and make it so you don't have to edit out too many stumbles on my part.
Right. Well, I think we should be good. I mean, you know, all the conversations have been it's been very good so far, and, you know, I'm looking forward to the last couple too. I mean, it's, you know, as I was saying a minute ago, that it's a chance for listeners to kind of get the full inside look into my thought process of the series, a look inside my brain a little bit. You know, and
that could be scary, listeners.
I mean,
do it trepidatiously. Move forward, listening, if you will.
Caution.
Yes, that should probably be a disclaimer on every episode.
Actually, yeah, you know, I might, I'm kidding, but, you know, put 18 plus or something on
Oh well.
Oh gosh, no, it's yeah, it's just nice to be able to share that with the listener though, because there will be some fans of the series that love it so much they just want all the lore. Um, it's like when they watch Marvel shows,
Hmm.
they just want more, more, more. I hope that there's a decent following, and we'll see
Absolutely.
how it performs. But yeah, it's just a cool way to share that with listeners and viewers and stuff. Um, so yeah, I guess episode 3. Um, you know, definitely talk about that. What what questions do you have about episode 3? What stood out that you'd want to kind of get into right away?
Well, it's an interesting episode in my opinion, as just the whole we get into the religious aspect for
Yeah,
William. And I gave it a few watch throughs and caught a little bit each time, and didn't catch that. At first, it felt like it was more just at the end of the episode, but really, when you watch it, he's questioning his faith to some degree throughout the episode.
and even the whole series, I would add
Yes,
too. I mean,
but
he's
very evident in this particular episode,
yeah,
and uh, which when you go back to the first episode now, you understand some of the choices he made, because he's on this crusade, but why?
yeah,
It comes down to, and
yeah,
only thing about the Crusades, they were a religious crusade, but we'll use air quotes around that, religious crusades,
right.
because there were more motivations there.
Yeah.
There's a bit of economic drive. Well,
There's money. I mean, because people would be rewarded for going on crusade, and
hmm
it'd be a chance for redemption from crime. Someone was,
yeah,
it was a fresh start essentially. For people, for better or worse, and for others, it was a chance to just have an excuse to go kill and fight and kind of unleash the beast. In other words, and um, it was a violent period of history, and I think the point is really to take a different look at it. Um, you know, just given a new lens, I guess.
not everybody on the crusade was necessarily there for the same reason,
Yeah,
as you just said, and he clearly. I don't know his motivation for originally going on the crusade, whether he was pushed into it or forced into it or felt the need to go on it, but obviously it's not what you'd expected.
this might be a spoiler, so I guess I should disclaimer that. But um, yeah, I think because I think some of those questions will probably get answered a little bit in season 2. To be honest with you,
Then I often will make my predictions and see if I'm correct.
sounds good. I'll leave it to the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean it's. I think like a lot of good shows that I like will um if it makes you think and if it makes you wonder,
Mm.
sometimes that's a sign that it's doing something right.
Yes.
Other times it can be a sign that they um maybe didn't do all the homework too.
Yeah.
It depends
Sure.
on the show.
Sure.
Um but yeah, it's if it makes you think, it's a good thing, I would think
Absolutely.
generally.
Now, I don't know if you had meant to do this. I'm going to say you did because you pointed it out, but I thought the character of, say her name, Green?
Katarina.
Katarine. Uh, it was very similar to the Good Samaritan story, Bible.
Yeah.
Granted, you didn't have anybody else pass by and ignore two of you, but
Right.
here she's able to help you out, and I should say help.
Yeah.
And I like that religious allegory.
Yeah.
Whether it was an intentional or not, you can say it was intentional. Sound great.
It actually wasn't, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, I actually appreciated that. I thought,
I'm glad.
that's an interesting, she appeared when needed,
Yeah.
and well, that by the end of the episode, it seems like his faith was renewed a little bit.
It is.
That somebody came at that moment of need, and maybe it reawakened his faith.
I mean, I appreciate this perspective for sure, and I mean that is fair to say because it's. I mean, he's grappling with a crisis of faith the entire time that he's out there on this journey. And that is kind of a pivotal moment for him because really the first two episodes is his journey of kind of deciding what kind of person he wants to be a little bit, and that's kind of the last straw that's like, okay, I need to really do the right thing. Because with episode 2, spoiler alert, but where they fight the French Knight, he didn't intend to do that. It's
Right.
Yes, he spared his enemy and kind of befriended him, but it was because he was using his enemy to help him find his way home. So is it a good deed or is it a little bit selfish? It's open to the viewer's interpretation. And then episode 2, they agree to go find this knight, not so much because they're trying to save the village, but because, again, it's kind of he's trying to get home, and he
was an obstacle.
Yeah.
That's how I saw it. He was an obstacle that was in the way. It was a necessary path he had.
Yeah, exactly. And then when they fight the knight, and then when it ends up very deadly, it wasn't necessarily his intention to do that, but it kind of works out that way, and it's sort of like God's hand interceding, I guess you might say, like stepping in and changing the course a little bit, and that's for episode 3, where he kind of is looking back on this and looking at the future and saying, well, who do I want to be? And then, that conversation with Katrin as well, one that I thought came across really well, like between script and then carrying over onto the final scene, their conversation about even the people at his home in the castle. He's saying so many people hate the farmers. They're just treated terribly. They're just the serfs, just treated. And where she had said something to the effect of, well, show them something better. Show them what a true leader is going to look like. And that for him was a moment of kind of deciding, well, maybe I could be something more.
Well, even his questions to her about family.
Yeah.
There's an identity crisis there.
Yeah.
And whether that means, again, a full backstory yet, but
right.
Perhaps the dynamics in his family are not as strong as they should be. And so he's asking these questions because he wants to know what is a quote normal family like?
Yeah.
What is a relationship like? What is a relationship with loved ones? He's struggling with all of that.
Yeah.
So that was a revelation to him.
Yeah, I mean, especially where he's asking, what is marriage like? Like, what is a good marriage? That being one of his biggest questions is it like to love someone unconditionally and have them do the same in return? And
well, that made me immediately question what's going on with his mom and dad.
Yeah.
That right there, I'm like, oh boy, or else he's got a loved one back at home that he's not quite sure how to interact with her.
Well, it's
don't spoil anything.
Well, it's not a spoiler because he does say it in the episode, so it's not like spoiling season 2. But where he says like my brother and his wife, there's no joy there. That's kind of him saying like on that side of things, like someone closer to his own age, he's seen a different side of medieval marriage where it was less about love and more about duty and fulfilling obligations kind of thing. And he saw that side of things being up in the noble side of things. So then to hear Katrin talk about, my husband, we loved spending time together. To him, that seems odd, but beautiful. Right. And he wants that for himself because it's another, as he's got this identity crisis, what am I fighting for? Who do I want to be? What will happen when I go home? Who will I try to be at that point? He's imagined for himself, am I going to follow my brother's footsteps? Am I going to be in a loveless marriage, or will I do something greater?
And hopefully that's what he's aspiring. Aspiring for greatness.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair to say, for sure. I mean, so much of it carried over so well from the script onto the screen, though. Erica, my co-star for that episode, did such an amazing job. I mean, just so many kudos to her because between dialect and accent and stuff like that, doing research, trying to really find the character.
Right.
She did a great job with that, and bringing her own personal touch to it was great too. She recently got married around the time that we were filming and stuff like that, and it one thing that we had talked about in our own behind the scenes chat was how that was very meaningful for her to step into this character, because it was a chance to almost bring her own personal experience to the board, which is it's beautiful. It
Well, it's
helps
good if
tell
an
the
actor
story.
can do that.
Yeah,
That definitely helps their character.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it made so much sense, and it just it's so nice how it transfers over, because sometimes you don't know when you write a script and then you film it. Sometimes things don't transfer. Sometimes it just a scene that you thought was going to be super great and meaningful. Sometimes it falls flat, and sometimes you actually have to cut it out because it just
Right.
doesn't translate. And other times it works better than you think.
Absolutely.
um, was there I guess was there any questions? Were there any questions you had that maybe weren't answered? I mean, something that could be shed some light on, perhaps, or
Well, I kind of mentioned, obviously there's something going on with him as far as William, as far as his identity crisis. So I know, those questions I've already kind of touched on.
yeah,
I am curious. He didn't play a big part, but Fadi, I'd like to know more about him.
sure, okay,
And
yeah,
that's that. We're introduced to him very early on, obviously in episode 1, and they're clashing. Is there more to his story? He seems to be a man of faith. I felt
yeah,
that. I felt that a little bit, but
yeah.
will we get to know a little bit more about him? As they journey. I'd be curious about that.
So I won't spoil it, but I can tell you 100% you will learn more about Fadi's backstory. A lot of that actually comes out in episode 5, in the
Excellent.
finale.
Okay.
There's a final conversation that those two have, which you kind of really get. You get some of that in episode 1, and then you get the rest in episode
Right.
5 with Fadi. And in those two conversations, after the whole course of the series, you can see that when William and Fadi are talking about both of their pasts, particularly with Fadi's, you can see growth. A lot in William, because he's a lot more open-minded by that point. But even with Fadi, it seems like he's sort of made peace with some of his own demons past, and he's kind of come to accept certain things that maybe in the beginning he still felt very sad about, per se, which is really cool.
Well, you want that character growth. That's
Yeah.
that's a good thing for any story to have.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. At the very end of episode 3, as William is praying, you could tell, at least in my opinion, some of his prayer was rote memorization. So he's still growing. He's going to be growing in his faith, I assume, because prayer was, melding of his own words and the Lord's prayer, and like he was trying so hard to be thankful and to be prayerfully thankful.
Yeah.
But I think he struggled with some of the words, so he just kind of relapsed into what he had learned,
Right.
and threw those in.
Yeah.
I thought that was so that. Whether that was an intentional showing of some growth, but still not quite there. That's what I took out of it. Is he's getting there, but not entirely yet.
It is intentional. That much definitely was intentional. It's kind of his first attempt in the whole series to pray at all. It's him trying to reconnect with God in a moment of crisis. He feels at his lowest, about to lose yet another friend, kind of thing, and that is definitely a pivotal moment for sure. Yeah, that was a big thing for sure. And some of it too with the whole series, and there's different ways that various characters sort of act in a Christ-like manner, I guess. There's certain ways that the Bible teaches about good deeds and how to treat your fellow man and woman kind of thing. And one of the things I enjoyed was trying to demonstrate that. You know,
Right.
like what could that look like of someone trying to do the right thing, even if there's struggle along the way. That was
Well,
fun.
and he's putting himself at risk,
Yeah,
not following through on what he's supposed to be doing in the Crusades. You know, that's
yeah,
one of the, again, going back to the whole reason for the Crusades. You mentioned it earlier on. Some were on this crusade for that, to earn forgiveness,
yeah,
whether William is or not. Again, that's his backstory, but
yeah,
uh, he's putting that potential forgiveness at risk by not following through. Church
yeah,
was very strong about deeds equal forgiveness,
yeah,
which is contrary to the Luther comes out later in the Reformation and says, it's grace that is forgiveness for you.
yeah, yeah,
The church was pushing this. You wanted to be forgiven. This is one way of getting that forgiveness. And he's, at this point, if that's the mentality he's got, he knows he's putting his eternal life on
yeah,
in jeopardy
yeah,
because that's what he's been taught.
yeah. I mean, it's absolutely, absolutely, yeah. It's yeah. I mean, so many aspects of the church at that time. I mean, you know, in a lot of ways, it even you could maybe call it a business even in some
Oh yeah.
ways, because there was so much emphasis on even just donating to the clergy class could then sort of equal, okay, you're going to heaven,
Mhm.
which, you know, can be kind of dubious a little bit. You know, I think it's, uh, maybe I'm getting a little bit out of the water here, but, you know, I think that's one thing where, as history went on, like with the Reformation and stuff like that, I think people took a different view of it at one point where, um, you know, more about deeds, for example, more about
Mm-hmm.
grace, as you mentioned, rather than money, and you know, trying to bring the focus back to the right reasons for
Right.
believing. Essentially, I think that's the best way to put it. Uh,
Well, I've always looked
but
at the Crusades as being, in part, a misinterpretation of what the Bible
yeah,
told them to do.
yeah,
The Bible says that we want all people to come to faith.
yeah,
Crusades took it to the extreme because you're going to
yeah,
come to faith whether you like it or not, and we may force you to come to faith.
right, yep,
Uh, they took it to that activism extreme, and
yeah,
that's not the way the Bible intends it.
yeah. I mean, I would agree. I think, you know, a lot of points in history are misguided, for sure. You know, I mean, most wars in all of history, if you really, you know, study it and look at it, you can find points where there are off ramps to avoiding bloodshed, and a lot of times in history, misguided notions just pulled the trigger,
Oh yeah,
essentially.
or
Um,
choosing to ignore it.
yeah, that too.
Here's the peaceful resolution. Oh, we're going to go different.
Yeah, It's- yeah. I mean, you know, as a student of history, that's something that fascinates me for sure. Yeah, it's crazy though. It's you know, and something that I think that we tried to show as well with William and Fadi being of different faiths, but both being faithful and being godly men. Um, you know, even though they have different manners of practicing that and different names for it, you know, it's kind of showing that they do believe in the same thing, essentially. Um, you know, they want to treat other people well. They want to protect those who can't protect themselves. Um, they want to do right by their fellow man. They care about their families. Um, and I think that in a lot of religions, you know, the purpose of it, I think, is very, a lot of it originates from the same place, you know,
Mhm.
spiritually, mentally, kind of thing, is that people want to bring some good into the world. And I think that's part of what we're trying to share is, you know, a story that shows people might come from very different backgrounds and yet still serve the same purpose, I
Right.
guess, if that makes sense.
It does. It does.
Uh,
I see Fadi as being, well, let's go back to William. William went on this crusade, and the enemy was faceless at that time.
yeah,
Fadi has put a face to the enemy
Yes.
And he now is realizing, just said that while they may have differing beliefs,
Yeah.
the core values may be similar, if not the same.
Yeah.
Which is what you just said.
Yep.
And Fadi became that face, and that's what not what I anticipated from my enemy.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's yeah. I can appreciate that lens on it too, because I think that's fair to say is that it does put a face to the enemy. And some of it too is in a lot of points of war, it's easy to theoretically talk about claiming X number of lives or all the glorious things that could happen in a battle, but when you're actually faced with it, it's a lot different.
Right.
Like famous boxers in the UFC or whatever we'll talk about. Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. It's kind of like that. It's a little bit of, well, what do you do when you actually see their eyes? It's like, well, a little different.
And the same can be the reverse. William is now the face Fadi's enemy.
True. Yeah.
And they're both seeing each other through a different lens.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's beautiful. They both even acknowledge too at various points in the series about how, they've come to respect their enemy and that they become friends, that they appreciate that relationship. And yet they both do openly admit that they know, their loved ones, their home, all that kind of stuff. The people that they grew up with would either not approve or not understand and still would have a hard time. William in particular said that in episode 1, where, all the people at home had talked about all the violent things that happened to Christians in the Holy Land.
And they're not, and they're not wrong.
Right. I mean, some of that stuff did happen for
they're
sure.
Not wrong.
Yeah. Trying to think of an example.
It's that stereotypical thing.
Yeah.
Body's not fitting into that stereotype.
Right.
And that's the eye opener for William.
Yeah.
They're not, his enemy is not all the same.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
He's realizing that stereotype that pushed on him doesn't hold true for each.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can say about every stereotype.
True. I mean, even in the modern world, there's so many instances where, in the world we live in, people, it's easy for things to divide people, whether that comes to religion, politics, or race, or
sports teams.
Sports teams, all that stuff.
Go Pack, go.
Wisconsin natives, for those who aren't aware.
Sorry, you just lost a bunch of listeners. I apologize.
Right. All the Chargers fans are gone, including my father. But there's so many things that can divide people up that it's easy to forget how much people have in common if they really look at it.
Right.
So that was another intentional thing with the series too, just to kind of get that nugget of wisdom out there, I guess. Yeah, it was so much fun. Other thoughts about episode 3 before maybe jumping into like a different topic?
I'm looking at my notes. I've hit everything that I wanted to hit.
Sure.
I tried to take some dubious, not dubious. That's not, you know what I meant. Copious. That's the word.
Yes.
Copious.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah. Tried to take as some notes on there. I think I've hit the things that hit me in the episode.
Yeah. No, for sure. I appreciate that. And, I appreciate you doing the notes and stuff too, because, it helps get thoughts together too, because, there are things that will come to you in the moment versus things that, it's memory only goes so far.
Yes. Oh, yes.
For
example.
Trust me. But, I guess with something like, filmmaking in general, because that's one thing that I've spoken about with other people that I've chatted with for the podcast and stuff like that, or anything creative really, because you guys did the podcast, you know what it's like to labor for hours and hours on something that you love and care about and share that, when it comes to telling a story or providing entertainment, I guess, in your opinion, why is that important to do that?
A break from the
Yeah.
get to take them, whether it's 10 minutes, 50 minutes, 3 hours. Hopefully, set aside maybe some of the stresses you're having or some of the responsibilities sometimes that you're having, and just step into a different world.
Yeah.
Whether it's a movie, podcast, a YouTube video. I sit and take hours of watching people play board because I enjoy board games.
Yeah.
I could be playing the board game, but I enjoy watching them once in a while play it too. And that
Sure.
it's a break from the norm, and and of course it's also research as to whether I want to buy that board game or not too.
Because you could go to the wife and say, well, I'm pretty confident in this decision.
I've looked into this one. I think this is a good one to pick up. We joke at home now because your dad has a collection of board gaming group, pretty decent collection of board. We joke that we buy expansions now. That's an old run, way back to another expansions as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they're all expansions. They're expansions to the collection. I don't know. So my wife now has started to talk about, well, she's just going to get some shoes because that's an expansion to her collection. So that's our happy medium at this.
I mean, to me, that just sounds like a good compromise, I mean,
it'll work. It's any sort of creative outlet is that break.
yeah.
Take your mind off of what.
Yeah. I mean, that I definitely agree, and I've kind of thought about it too, and with in that same vein, gets people thinking. It gets them.
Mm-hmm.
It can help find wisdom, even, or just give you a chance to reconnect with yourself a little bit, I guess. Too.
Well, and watching these first 3 episodes pushed me to do a little digging on the Crusades to make sure,
Sure.
Okay, this is what I think I remember and I think I know, but let's verify that. So it was an eye opener, maybe,
Yeah.
or at least a refresher that way.
Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense for sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be so much to share though. It's like in some ways it can be kind of challenging to narrow down, to one specific episode too to talk about the series. I mean, because there's just so much that happens that it flows from one to the next. Where obviously as we're talking about, there's discussion about other episodes too a little bit, which makes sense.
Well, you've got to keep them.
True.
You know where it's going, so we don't.
Yeah. No, true. And then that's the thing too, is like trying to translate, what's the story that we've crafted and, that we're trying to tell, and how to translate that for people. And, it's like you want to communicate it in a concise and meaningful way. That's going to make sense for the viewer, and that's going to stick with them. It's hard not to essentially just regurgitate information or just info dump, or
Right.
It's about presenting it in an artful way, and that's another challenge with just storytelling or creative stuff in general. Is trying to get it, trimming the fat, making sure it makes sense, getting it done, so that it's easy to follow.
So I'm going to turn.
Sure. Yeah.
So did you have season 2 planned out as you were doing season 1, or is it kind of grown based on season 1?
A little bit of both. I mean, it's definitely grown since getting the episodes edited and, really kind of digging into it in the post-production side of things. That really catapulted the story forward. After we filmed everything, that made it more clear what direction it had to go, for sure. But for a while, I was thinking about, what theoretical directions the story could go, things that sounded cool. There were a couple plot lines that I knew for sure 100% where the story would broadly go, but it was kind of about filling in the gaps about what makes sense as steps along the way, or how do I take it there, I guess. And that's, yeah, it starts broad, you have a big idea, and then you have to sort of narrow it down, like what's the most important core of it, and then you kind of build it back up from. So it's, if that makes sense,
It
it's kind
does.
of a lot of trimming and then adding and then trimming, and just it's like a balloon filling up and then
Mhm.
deflating.
So then follow up to that. I'm just gonna keep it questions then.
Sure, yeah.
So are there any elements that wanted in season one that may have had to be cut that may have to appearance in season
Um,
without giving away juicy details?
right. Well, there wasn't anything in season one that had to be cut,
Okay.
actually. Um, that's the cat jumping off the bed there. um, yeah, sometimes the mic picks that up, but yeah, it's we didn't have to cut any scenes,
Okay.
which we were fortunate.
Good.
There's other films where I've had to, but we had a well-oiled machine. We got it done and got everything we needed. Um, there were some ideas that I wanted to maybe tackle that just never quite made it to the script, I would say. Um, it just either it made more sense to postpone to a future season, or it just didn't make sense at all. I
Okay.
mean, there's certain
Well, the story
characters.
evolves a little, like
Yeah,
you said, as you film that
yeah,
it didn't
yeah, for
quite
sure.
work out
Yeah.
exactly. So okay.
I mean, there's some characters that I had thought about for season one that did get axed in the script writing process. Um, some of it was just thinking about what size of cast was going to work the best too. At a certain point, there can be such thing as too many or too few characters.
Mhm.
To some extent, there was too many, so I had to pinch things down a little bit. Which was good. Um, yeah, I mean, and there's things that I thought about including in season two, which just seemed like there was too much being packed into where it had to be postponed. Um, so yeah, I mean, if I could have it my way, I'd like to see this thing go up through 5 seasons. Like I have a big story plan.
So you have a an outline of where.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty well detailed at this point. Now that we're getting close to releasing here, where um, the script for season two is written, it's done, it's set in stone, everything's super tight, it's exactly what it needs to be. We're just waiting on season one to drop before we start really trying to plan that and buy
Mhm.
costumes and rehearse, because I'm just so busy right now getting all this done. But season three, I've got most of the plans complete. I know exactly what the story's going to be, what the big events are, what the small events are, who the characters are. There's a couple details that'll have to get ironed out and smoothed over just a little bit to massage those. Um, but yeah, I think once we get moving, that'll
Very
get
nice.
easier. Yep, yeah, it's a big story, and uh, I think a lot of great stories, or at least ones that I enjoy, are ones that they have it planned pretty much from start to finish from the
Mhm.
very beginning, so that they know what direction it goes. Because
Right.
I've seen what it's like with shows or movies where there's not a plan and they just start putting stuff out just to fill an obligation or a desire for more, and then it can fall flat because then the characters don't feel real, the story doesn't make sense, it's a bit jumbled. Um,
You don't want the story to. You're
no,
right. There are some that have obligations that they have to do so many seasons,
yeah,
filler episodes that
yeah.
feel like very yeah. There's a few that you watch and you're like, well, there's 45 minutes I'll never get back.
There's some things like that. And, there's some movies that be a big blockbuster hit that are really good. That, it could just be a standalone, but sometimes studios just want more because they see a money pit and they force a sequel that doesn't need to happen.
Right.
and then it's just boring for the viewer. Whereas if they had a plan for the story start to finish, maybe it would make sense.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. It's
Absolutely.
kind of in that realm.
You want to have an end goal in sight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's respectful for the viewer too, because you want to respect their time. As you said, if they get 45 minutes that they'll never get back, it's like, I mean, if they're donating their time to and mental real estate to allow in your story, you got to make it worth the time.
Absolutely.
That's with anything. It's you don't want to waste people's time with too much nonsense. Um, and something else too is like the idea of goal setting and stuff like that. Um, tackling something that might seem ambitious and impossible a little bit, and just trying. I think there's something to be said about that, and that's yeah. I don't know, because I wasn't sure that we could do it, to be honest. For season one, seemed
Well, getting it
too
off the
big.
ground, I'm sure there were lots of hurdles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's financially or just finding the people, or the motivation wasn't the problem, because like the determination was there, but it's like you go into it and you start thinking like, is this too soon? Like, do I have the resources for this? Like, can I actually make this happen? I think there's something to be said about that with creative stuff too, where it's very scary going in. Sometimes you don't know what the reception will be. That's another thing. I'd be lying if I said, if I didn't admit that there's some degree of like, I'm wondering. Um, it's but that's the beauty of it. Share a story.
That's the leap
Yeah.
you take.
Yeah.
Bringing it full circle. That's the leap of faith.
Yeah, true.
There you go.
True. I mean, because you're fairly involved in your local church. You you guys go often, and have helped out with like basketball games and stuff like that and all that good stuff. And um, with being involved on that side of things, and then seeing a story that kind of takes that broad subject and tries to dig into it a little, I guess, what is that perspective for you about seeing stories that grapple with the subject? How does that influence your lens when you're viewing the series? I guess.
I struggle sometimes when I watch series that contrary to what I believe, but it doesn't necessarily stop me from watching.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Certain character archetypes or even arc. But if it's a good story in general, I'll keep coming back. I don't want to be that closed. This particular small subset of the story has offended me or gone against what I think. Therefore, I will never, ever watch it again.
Yeah.
It's got a good story, and there's a little section that I may not agree with. I'll keep coming. Story starts to wander way too much.
Yeah.
And then we got to rethink about watching and try to keep it.
I mean, I can appreciate that, because I mean, it's good. It's good to have an open mind. Sometimes I've been resistant to watching certain movies because I thought, it's just not my thing. Like, it's not my genre. I don't know. But then I watch it, and even if there's a lot of parts of it that I don't agree with, there's always something to take away from any creative, and you kind of gotta for that. Like with horror movies, for example, I don't like the horror genre that much. I'm not a big scary movie kind of guy. However, helping out with a couple projects with other people with horror photo shoots, or just doing some research, watching certain scary movies with friends who really want to see it, and like, hey man, can you just watch this with me? Okay, like, because at least I can look at the filmmaking aspects of it.
Right.
At the very least, it's something to take away. Where sure, this isn't something I'd necessarily seek out, but there's still something to glean from it. And
I found my taste has changed over
yeah,
high school horror movie time, but
sure,
they also weren't stick as some of them.
yeah,
And like I said, my tastes and my ability for the jump scares and other stuff. Yeah,
fades away.
I'll stick with. I'll go to something else. I'll
Yeah,
stick with stuff that doesn't put me on the nervous edge of my seat.
yeah. I mean, that's fair. And people talk about music tastes changing in people's lives too. It's I mean, life just follows its own journey, and just kind of roll with it. Are there Did you have other notes about like subject ideas? I feel like we're missing something that we were thinking about talking about.
No, we hit everything that I had down.
Yeah. I guess maybe like wrap up thoughts kind of thing, or like closing. Trying to think of a couple good questions that viewers would make kind of. There's been so many things kicking around between all the conversations, but as far as like with let me let me circle it back here because I'm trying to form the thought. But like so with the Bible and stuff like that and the teachings, do you think that there are other movies that you've seen where you've noticed some of those parallels as well? I guess that's kind of the thought that I was looking at. Because you noticed there were a couple similarities in episode 3. Are there other movies that you've seen that have things that stick out to you, like, oh, this looks like an element?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I'm sure there are.
It's broad.
Yeah, it's very broad. I mean, you could go. Okay, let's go to the cheap out here and go saga, the Star Wars saga.
I mean, it's a great series.
I saw the original in the theaters when it was known as the Star Wars. And they dropped the. There was no A New Hope. And right there, intentional or not by Lucas, there's just there in the whole story of redemption, like it or not. Original saga is really Darth. Spoil it?
Yeah.
Okay. Darth Vader's redemption story.
Oh, spoiler alert.
It really when you start to look at it, it becomes his redemption story.
Yeah.
And there's some religious parallels in there.
Sure.
And so that one comes. I know there's others, but that's the saga I'll always go back to.
Sure.
Because I even pull questions from there. So Star Wars related religious devotions that you can make those. Yeah. Because you can have that whole argument. Of course, is that a religion?
Yeah.
Some it is.
Yeah. I mean, and the ways that George Lucas talked about that whole concept too, so much amazing behind the scenes interviews that he's done. Talks about his forming of the idea, and it's pretty fascinating for sure.
It is.
What about I guess this is more of a question about my series, but like, I get is there something that you want to see happen? I suppose I can't confirm whether it does happen because that'd be spoiling.
Nor deny.
Right, but what do you want to see happen with William or the other characters? Like, what? Like, if you were writing the script, where would you see it? Season.
Are you trying to get ideas from? No.
Maybe. I mean,
you already said that you had this kind of planned out. I don't know if
I do. Right. I mean, I'm definitely stealing ideas. No. But
all right.
I'm curious what because you are a viewer too, and I'm curious like what.
I mentioned I'd like to know more. We're getting some of William's backstory. I'm curious. Is he going to make it home? And
I can't spoil it for you.
I know you can't. Okay. I'm not asking.
Okay.
What are the repercussions?
Okay, sure.
For his choices that he's made.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
and what's going to happen to his friend.
Yeah.
Are they going to separate ways? Are they stick together? Are they going to that cause conflict between them as they realize maybe there's not as much in some things we have in common, but there's still some things we don't. And will there be will that cause a future tension between them, or are they going to become better? So those are the things I'm curious as to where we're headed.
Well, without spoiling it, all I can say that's going to be a neutral is all those questions do get answered.
I had some good questions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because they do get answered, and I think viewers are going to love that because it takes some turns for sure, but yeah. And then, lastly, what would you like to see more of in movies in general out there? What do you enjoy seeing?
Practical effects.
So tell me, like, what is that? What does that make? Tell me about that.
So many movies now are green screen.
Yeah, true.
And granted, if the green screen is done well and the CGI is done well, and I forget what they did on the Mandalorian, whatever that big dome is that they were in.
Yeah.
That with the projection, it is phenomenal looking.
Yeah.
But I like the physical effects. When I was a kid, I gobbled that stuff up. To be behind the scenes stuff, early days of movies was not easy to come by. You had to get a magazine. You know what a magazine is, right? You have to buy it and open it. It's got paper, and you got to turn it. You can't go online and find this stuff.
Yeah.
There, I'm dating myself a bit, but I just gobbled up how they would make the models.
Yeah, for sure.
The X-wing and the TIE fighter, and how they made the lightsaber out of an old flash from a camera, which I am constantly on the search for one. Far too expensive.
Yeah.
I just love that stuff. And so I appreciate when modern movies, yes, I appease to the audience and the action, want that action. CGI is part all future projects. I don't see it go. I like when you can see effort. That's a physical thing on the set, because there are some it's just the actor. That's all that's on the set.
Yeah, like with Marvel.
Yeah, but I like seeing. Okay, they put some time making, and it's there, and they act with it, and
sure,
that was something that always fascinated me as a kid.
For sure.
Some of it has held up to the test of time. Some has not.
Sure.
You get it. Some of it still is that good that you're like, that CGI, I don't know if that is or not. That's the sign of a good practical effect.
No, that makes sense. I like that. That's in like movies where they're fighting with real swords too, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's pretty exciting. Obviously, we were doing that. Like,
I was going to say, I didn't hoping that wasn't CGI.
It was not CGI. Okay. No, we had.
If you do a backflip, I don't assume that's CGI, because I've never seen you do a backflip.
I don't know if I could.
Don't spoil it. But
well, now we got to shoehorn it into season 2.
All right, well, I'm looking forward. Okay, I will look for that backflip.
I guess I'll have to steal that idea. No, I appreciate it. I mean, any last minute?
No, I wish you well. I'm happy that you're down this path. I'm curious to see where it goes. I'm happy to see that season 2 is on its way, and
it's crazy.
I'm looking forward to it all.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I can't wait to share it. Yeah. I mean, it's been fun. It's been fun. We'll see where it goes, and there's many more discussions to be had. So, viewers, listeners, if you're liking this conversation, this is a shout out to you. Drop a comment. Let us know what discussion points you liked the best. If you had thoughts, let us know. If you want to hear more from Mark, get those calls going.
Hopefully I didn't scare anyone.
No, let's hear some love here. Let's get back on. So cool. I think we'll end it there. I guess.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks for listening here. Stay tuned for the next companion guest episode as well.